there was a anthropologist who went to the South Pacific Islands around 1900 and sort of documented the different fishing techniques of some indigenous folks who lived in sort of like an island system. And when they wanted to catch fish from the coral reefs, they would sort of like mash up a poisonous root and stick it on a stick and go out and throw a net over a coral reef, stick in the stick, the poison would come out of the root, the fish would flounder into the net, and they would go home with dinner. And that was a very stable way to get food, and it had no sort of like superstitious behaviors attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
They did the thing because they knew the thing worked, and they knew that would get them the calories and food they needed to see the next day. When those same folks went shark fishing, it was a dramatically different experience in terms of supernatural beliefs. There was a magic man of the village who instituted all sorts of taboos on whether you couldn't sing, you couldn't have sex, you couldn't whistle, you had to wear certain clothing. And then when it was shark hunting day,
would you normally have sex while you were shark hunting? Like, does that need to be prohibited?
Well, like I'm talking about, like, good question, Joe. I'm glad you raised that, Joe. Yeah. No, the answer is no. This is like the 2 months leading up to shark hunting season.
Yeah,
they're
I
building
don't mean to
boat.
presume, how you hunt sharks or kink shame.
You've been doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
Now, when I hunt a shark, it's pretty steamy. Yeah.
Jaws
but
5.
they go out in these. Oh my god. They go out in these boats on the open ocean in a dangerous spot weather-wise, and they have these sort of like sticks with shells strung along the sticks, and they shake those sticks underwater, and it mimics the sound of a shoal of fish jumping in and out of the water. And then when the shark comes to that sound, they bash in the shark's head with like a piece of like stove wood, essentially. And that is not at all a sure thing, right? That's a very chaotic endeavor without a lot of hope of success. And because it's such a sort of like chaotic, uncertain area of their lives, they attach all sorts of superstitions because they didn't have any other sort of way to have the confidence of control that they had when they were fishing in the coral reefs. And so when a society is more chaotic, when we feel like we have less control over our lives, certainly we're going to be more prone to turning to supernatural explanations for things. Maybe we can compartmentalize where we can ask an astrologer about how to cope with grief, but we can still ask an accountant to do our finances. But maybe we can't. Maybe we're just a couple generations away from asking our astrologer to do our finances.
Well, I think a lot of when I was saying that, I think we're approaching something with institutional decline that looks kind of like the 70s. Is like anytime an empire's star is waning, you see a rise in a belief in magic. And that's why I get so frustrated with people where I'm like, even if you believe this, you want the same political outcome I want. If you press this button, it does this. Like it does. And like when you look at, and it makes sense because like when Edward Endger has like a cool diagram, an ego and archetype, where he's talking about the thing where the institution is containing the archetypes versus where the unconscious is speaking directly to people, and the intuition looks a lot like schizophrenia. But there's like this, you go back to like Rome, and when the Gaul is getting paraded through the streets with elephants, and they're like, the empire reflects your ego, your personal power is the nation or the religious cult is an extension of your personal power, so you have power and certainty. People feel okay, okay, well, the empire's not doing so hot, but we're going to pay for these gladiatory games, go watch football, and your team's going to win, and you're going to get, it's a reflection of my ego. When you say all the political options are bad, you're not going to get what you want, yeah, you can go vote, but it's the ending of Mass Effect 3. Then what happens is people go inward to find a source of certainty, and sometimes with interesting results. I mean, I don't think that process is entirely bad, but like, yeah, when you say left or right, whatever you want, the political options are terrible and you're not going to get what you want, and the empire doesn't do anything that you want. And, we have these huge group of issues that are bipartisan that everyone wants,
Yeah.
and neither political
Yeah.
party will touch them. What you
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
60% of your population believing in magic every time. That's why Mithraic cults exploded in Rome. Like, if you do that, that's what you get. And there's people that want to be like, well, I go on to Wikipedia and I cite my sources and I have a thing where you can check the meme for accuracy. It doesn't matter. If you continue to
Yeah.
have a political stagnation like we're doing, what you get is this, and you could say you don't like that, but not accepting that is just a refusal to accept the way the world works on its own terms. This pretend.
It's absolutely true. And whether we chalk that instability up to, hyperpartisanship or late stage capitalism or just sort of like societal decay or the internet or whatever it is, you're absolutely right that it seems inevitable that these beliefs are going to be spiking around now. And uh, it's really, really important that we figure out ways to cope with and overcome that and still have faith in one another and in our collective actions. Because
Mhm.
that's really what's sort of like at stake here is the belief in a shared reality,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Paranormal beliefs that prize the individual experience over a shared reality, whether that shared reality is, the dogma of a church or the outcome of a scientific study, the facts. Then you really have a radically different society that may not be able to take care of its people
Yeah.
in the same way that we have right now. And if that's the way we're going, we gotta bridge that gap and uh, make sure that that's a positive change in society and not just a sort of like degradation and collapse, like has happened in the past, as you point out, Joe.
Well, I mean, I think both political parties don't really want to do the things that, I mean, to a certain extent, some elements I think in the Republicans do. But like a lot of the Democrats, people are like, we've seen you get elected, we've seen you have a supermajority, we've seen you control all three branches of government, and then you were like, oh well, somehow Mitch McConnell's stopping me. I don't know. I have to wait till 100% of everyone agrees with me to do anything. And when you do that, people quit believing you, and when people can see not even the weird coincidences and deep esoteric whatever. I mean, when people can just see, okay, the Panama paper things happen and the official story does not make sense. The people you're punishing are not even the one when the Epstein thing happens. I mean,
Mhm.
you're those, and no one will touch these things, when just every
Yeah.
15 years we say, oh, oops, the CIA did something really bad, but no one was punished. And we promise we won't do it again, but no one was held accountable. And we'll do this 12 years later, since when you continue to do that, what do you expect to happen? And when you have neither political party will do anything, I think that, and I'm not trying to make a political point here, I'm just trying to make a
Mhm.
psychology one, that like you're feeding all of these things that are ripping these institutions down that you claim to love based on your own
Mhm.
avoidance of those issues and those hard problems. And I think that you look
Yeah.
at that really honestly at the end of
Yeah.
this life.
Yeah. It seems like that we've cut out so many exceptions to transparency, in the name of national security or the name of sort of like shielding medical practitioners from consequences
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. Like, you know, those are good goals, I suppose, to maintain national security
Mhm.
and to allow a practitioner
Did it
to
work? Is the world better? I
right,
mean,
right.
Noam Chomsky's got a pretty good line in the end of one of his books about, like, if you look at the war in Iraq and you look at everything that we did after 9/11, assume we did nothing and we took this money and we spent it on anything else.
Yeah,
Lighting it on fire may have been better than what we did.
yeah, yeah,
Look at the
yeah,
effects
right.
we're dealing with now and will be over the next 25 years from that
Exactly right.
foreign
Yeah.
policy experiment. But, there's no accountability. John Bolton is back in the White House for a minute until, someone else is. It's like, why can we take some of that hyper logic and objectivity that we claim to do and maybe look at people who have been wrong about foreign policy every time they've opened their mouth for 80 years and get them out of the Senate? Can we do that?
Right. Absolutely.
And we defend them
and
because there's no one else until they're so old they have dementia, and so it's mean to criticize them, but they still have to be wielding the keys to nuclear missiles. I mean, like, what is that system? And how do you expect anybody to go into a hospital and be like, yeah, this makes sense. I believe in authority and stuff.
It's money in politics, it's special interests, and one of the things that's so frustrating about it is that every time there's sort of like a surge of, what I'll call progressivism, but because I am a progressive, is, every advancement of worker rights, say, is sort of like grappled with by the capitalistic powers that be, and they just evolve new systems. And so every time there's an advance, we make the system tougher and the game gets harder to beat. And it takes so much collective action to achieve anything for members of the public. And the power structure just sort of like adapts and evolves.
Hear the rest at gettherapybirmingham.com/podcast, on YouTube, or in any video library when you search for the Discover, Heal, Grow podcast, a Taproot Therapy Collective podcast.